So what most of us are doing at the moment is just producing straightforward Revit models. So this is just a little model of a house. That's really useless, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change the resolution because actually I've got nothing on the screen at all. I don't know if we can still see that.
Yeah, that's good.
Is that better? So this is a little model of a house that we use just for testing things. Now, if we put ourselves in the mindset of the client, what they're going to want to have from this, in my humble opinion, is they're going to want to know that there's 3 rooms. They might want that divided into living and circulation, because quite often people want to know what the circulation space percentage is, for a house or any other building. And then they're probably going to want to know what furniture they've got in here, who makes it, if they've got to reupholster it, where they get the fabric from, or whatever. There's a piano in the corner there. You might want to know who tunes the piano. I don't know. So this is a typical situation. Just let me get my glasses because I've made it so small now I can't see it.
You go.
I've got the team glasses, Dave. So you can see that this is not a particularly complicated house. Sorry?
It's an Anderson shelter.
It's an Anderson shelter, yeah. It's not particularly well designed or anything like that, but that's what we're dealing with as the house. Now, at the moment in Revit, when you use it, if I go back to the ground floor plan, because it's easier to see, if you want to export, I mentioned there was 2 ways that we could create the Cobie for this project. We could get a plug-in from Revit that will do that, and we'll just directly write it out as Cobie, or we can write it out as IFC and then convert the IFC to Cobie. And I'm going to do both of those things in a way. So here's the first one. If we want to write it out as IFC, you'll find on Revit under Export you have, lo and behold, IFC. Now, cleverly what Revit did a couple of years ago was they detached the development of IFC from Revit itself. So if you want to do anything with IFC in Revit, you have to go to a website where they put their IFC exporter out as an open source project for everyone to engage with, which is quite a nice thing to have done. So now the community who are interested in IFC can actually engage in making that exporter work really well. So over the last 2 years, the people like myself and others who care about IFC and want the standard to be adopted have been able to improve the quality of Revit's IFC output significantly. It's really quite good now. So if you go and look on the websites, everything's a bit messed up on my computer because of changing the screen size. That's ridiculous. I have no idea how to get my screen back. If you look for IFC Revit exporter, you get different versions for different versions of Revit. Again, that shows you the kinds of problems you've got with these things. So, you can easily imagine on a project team, you might have one consultant using 2016, one using 2015, 114, 113. All of their versions of their BIM models will be different and incompatible. However, their IFC exporters are all the same version, but they're for different platforms. So if they use this and adopt the latest IFC exporter, which you can find on SourceForge here, they all produce the same quality IFC with the same information. Now that makes a massive difference in my opinion, because it means that when you're wanting to work and bring people's data together, you're bringing them together around the same standard. And if you try and merge people's BIM models together in their native format, it's just hiding to nothing. It just doesn't work, basically. So essentially, this is free. You download it, and it installs itself into Revit, and that's it. And you just go back and check that every 3 or 4 months, and it's updated, and you just keep downloading the latest version. Don't assume that the latest version is better than the previous version, because it is open source, and sometimes it goes backwards, okay? And then they fix it again. So only upgrade when you see that there's something on there that you think you need. So they're pretty good. You can see it gets very good ratings, and they will tell you what they've done. So everything that goes in there, you'll get to understand what it means, and you'll know whether you need it or not in your project. So I'm a big fan of this. So when I come here now and export, whatever I've got from that latest online version will now be accessed from this menu. So you can see here I'm using version 16.4 at the top. That's something you need to get used to checking in the industry, what version of things you're using, because it's really important to know if you're talking to someone, make sure you're talking with the same versions, or otherwise sometimes you can have problems. And the big thing that you need to know, there's a document I've given a link to in the PowerPoint that takes you through this step by step, which is what I'm doing. It's not quite 100% accurate, so sometimes you have to guess what they meant, because I think it was written for 2013 and they haven't updated it, but it's roughly the same. So here you can see we have some quite important metadata about your building project. So I mentioned that Revit doesn't have a building. It doesn't. It doesn't have a concept of a project, which is bizarre. You can have a couple of project parameters like the project name, but otherwise the project has no real substance. So what this does is allows you to start to add the metadata to your project that you need to give to other people you share it with. So the first tab here shows you, who you are, who do you want to be known as, rather than just take Steve, because I logged onto my computer as Steve. You can actually put how you want to be known as when you send your information to other people, which is really important. So that could be the legal identity of your company, because these things are legally bindable information. Once you fill that in, you do it once and it pretty much stays the same, but you might want to change it for different projects. There's address information, and this tends to be really about about the site. Okay, so this is the project address details. So it's very specific to the project. And you can see at the bottom, if I tick update project information, what that does is that writes it back into Revit so you don't have to do it again. They store it in some hidden things inside Revit. And then this is the most important tab. Essentially here, Revit doesn't have the concept of classification. It has properties. It doesn't have classification. And classification is hierarchical, and it's codified, and it's meaningful. Revit just has properties that are strings or numbers. Okay. So what you have to do in order to classify these objects, to give them back to your client and to do it properly, is you have to say what classification system you're going to use. So once you've agreed it with the client, this is where you fill it in, and the data you put in here are the actual, if you're using Omniclass or Uniclass or NRM1, you put in the details here so that when this information is exchanged, not just human beings can understand the classification, but computers can. So a computer will then be able to open that IFC file up and go, this is classified in NRM1, these are all the doors, because it knows how to talk NRM1. Okay? Really important to get that right. And all it's asking you therefore is name, who publishes it, so typically in the UK it's CPIC or RICS, what edition you're using, because classification systems in themselves evolve over time, so you need to know which one you've used. That helps people understand what you've got. what you haven't got, and then the date. And then this last line here is the most important part of it. So if you can see here, can you see that? Yeah. It's a list of Revit property names, okay? They're made up, okay? But these, which you'll find in the document, are the ones it recommends you use for Cobie. So Revit is suggesting that for, is there a zoom thing on this for magnifying the screen? Anyone know Windows 10, does it have a magnifying thingy?
Accessibility at the bottom. I think it's along the left-hand, right-hand side at the bottom, Steve.
Somewhere here?
Yeah, somewhere around there. Looks like a
Something
little
you need to
magnifying.
enable, though, right?
Hmm?
It's something you need to enable.
Ah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Just see if this thing, if I tap the right keyboard, it might.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, now I just need a tutorial on how to use it.
Oh.
Oh, hey! I don't need my glasses now. So, you can see along here, separated by commas, are a list of Revit property names that are places where you're going to put classification in your BIM model. Okay? So you can make this up, you can do entirely, this is the joy and the pain of Revit. It's totally configurable. You can do anything with it. Okay? So this is the mechanism they've come up with for creating Cobie. So in the bottom here, you list the names. Now the dot is Revit's convention for structuring classifications. So effectively, this is saying for Cobie, facility, category, there's a property. So this is like a hierarchical tree, Cobie floor category, Cobie space category. Okay? So once you've set that up, which you do just once, you've then essentially told the Cobie exporter that we've just downloaded where to look for the classification information in your BIM model. So when it sees those property names, it will go, that's the classification, I'll treat it specially and I'll write it out specially. Now I need to stop the zooming. Oh dear. Escape? That's always a good plan. No?
You've got your little zoom tool up in the top, in the north. That's it, in the northwest corner.
And then you press on the mouse. Press there.
Hey!
All the way back.
I tell you what, anybody think I was an idiot? So also in here, when we get to this screen, I'm going to zoom it again now. Where do we zoom tool go?
There it is. It's up there.
It's
It's
up
up.
there.
Keep going. Go north. Go north. Due north.
Left.
Under the
Go
A.
west.
Oh,
There is-
slowly
Oh,
phased
that
out,
is-
just
oh.
fire. Yeah.
No, I would never have seen that. So what you can see here is on here now, we have a whole set of different views of building models. Okay? So depending on who you want to send the information to, they have formally defined in a way that is part of the Building Smart standard how they want information to be structured in IFC terms. So IFC is not a single standard. It's a schema, but you can have multiple ways of sending data out in IFC. Is that a light bulb moment?
Yeah. Well, what we were talking about before,
Yeah.
when we were discussing levels of information or levels of detail going out to various people,
Yeah.
can you do that through IFC, I presume? Or you can
Yes.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
IFC fully supports levels of detail and levels of information. Okay, so and this will only get better. It's been there by design from day one. So in here you can see what this is saying is IFC 2x3, IFC 2x2, their versions 2.2, 2.3. Okay, 2.3 is by and large the de facto one used in the industry. That's the one that took off and everybody understood, and that's the one that most of the software vendors got their tools certified to use, so you can guarantee that they work with 2x3. 2x2 was a little bit premature, it was a bit earlier, and you can see here Singapore BCA Plan Checker. Singapore were one of the leading people in getting IFC working, but then they were more sort of at the bleeding edge rather than at the leading edge, so they kind of backed off a little bit. But now they're coming back with a vengeance, really, coming back on it 10, 15 years later. So these are older versions. So this top one here is the de facto standard that everyone goes for. And what it means by coordination view is it's designed to allow you to share information for the purpose of coordinating, bringing your project together. So the engineers, the architects, coordinating their models together. Okay? Then you've got here GSA Concept Design. This is the General Services Agency in the United States. They're a client, and they have decided, when I have IFC from you, I want it in this format. Okay? Basic FM handover view, I'm not really sure what that's about really. Just everyone goes for the extended FM handover view. So basic was just first stab and they didn't quite get it right. But some tools use that. So what you'll find is that some software will say, I can read IFC in the format 2x3 coordination view 2. If you do that, then they can read your files. It's really important you understand that. Not many people do. And they just send anything out and then people can't read the files. Here you can see at the bottom are two new views. These are massively important, and I think this will make a big difference. So this is IFC 4, which is much richer. It's been tidied up. I really like it. It's a very sound standard. And they've got two views, the reference view and the design transfer view. Now, the reference view is when you want to send people information for record. Okay? So it takes out any aspect of intellectual property that might be in the model. So a lot of people have got concerns that when they send their BIM components to people, they will nick their intellectual property and how that component works, and they don't want to invest their time in that. So if you use the reference view, it will send you an image, if you like, for want of a better word, a digital image of that object, but you've lost all the intelligence and all the intellectual property. But it's there for the purpose of the project, not to allow you to reuse it on other jobs. So a classic one you'll find is furniture manufacturers, like something like this. They'll invest in very clever libraries that can not just give you a chair and a desk, but are linked to their manufacturing processes. So that when you order them, it will automatically drive the production lines to create the desks that you've asked for. So people are doing that kind of thing now, quite much more than I would have thought. It's quite taking off. But they don't want to give you that object and then lose all that intellectual property, which goes to their competitor, who can then link it to their production line and make desks and chairs. So people get really worried about this. So that's the reference view. The design transfer view is where you want to transfer design responsibility for an object to somebody else. So if you've got another person over there who's going to take over the design of this object. So if you are the architect and you've said, I want a table roughly like that, but I'm transferring the full design responsibility for that to the table manufacturer. Okay? And that's design transfer view. So the information going between, you will have a commercial agreement to do that. The ownership of liability and risk and all the things that go with design transfer and design risk is managed by your contracts. So that's what that view's for.
So I take it you use IFC 4 for things like passing a design from an architect to an MEP,
Yes.
And then down the chain or along the chain or whatever you want to look at it.
Yeah. IFC 4 is still in its first year really of adoption, but we've just done an awful lot of work on XBIM with IFC 4 and it's fantastic. I mean, it's really, really good. And it does. So for instance, to give you a simple example, if I was sending a wash hand basin to someone, if it was a design transfer view, I might be sent the actual mathematics of the curves of the wash hand basin, rather than triangles that make it look like a wash hand basin, which would be a reference view. So the reference view would look exactly the same. It would still look smooth and nice, but all you've got is like approximations of the surface. You haven't got the information to shape that properly or make it. And that's the kind of difference you get. You might not have properties like, so I want to make this basin, instead of 90 centimetres, I want to make it 80, and in Revit it would just resize and there you go. It stops that kind of thing. So you can't change the things in this design context, really.
Do you have to put parameters in before so it knows how to do that, or does Revit, is it automatically programmed to do it, as you said?
If I select the reference view here as opposed to the design transfer view, Revit will use a different geometric representation when it writes it out.
So that's already in, you don't have to put any more.
Yeah, anything more. So from an end user's viewpoint, it's straightforward. And that's the whole purpose, is to control transfer of design rights or design potential. So if I select this extended handover view there, and now there are a whole pile of other things I can do in here to control the output, which I don't need to change actually. But you can see it's set up various things like coordination view, it's wrong. By selecting that, I can choose which properties I want to export, and I can choose whether I want to use different representations. But these options are all pre-configured in that. Okay. So when I select that, it's selected a set of options that make sense for that kind of export. Now, it isn't totally straightforward. So before I do it, I'm going to cancel that. The other thing I have to do is I have to let Revit know how to translate objects in Revit to objects in IFC, which is what you were asking me just now. And I do that by scrolling down the bottom of here and going to IFC options. And this gives you a list of all of the objects in Revit and how Revit works and what they will become in IFC. Okay? And that can change. So if I go here and load, here I've got export layers for changing to British Standard 1192 conventions. Here's export layers for IFC itself. And if I open that, it changes all the mappings of these things. So when we look down here, we'll see now that furniture is mapped to a system furniture element in IFC terms. So each of the things in Revit has a counterpart in IFC. Revit is actually built on IFC. Okay, so the conceptual model in Revit, that's not strictly true. The design of Revit is the same as IFC in terms of the object model underneath. So it's quite easy to see how things map between them. When you use platforms like ArchiCAD, it becomes a little bit more difficult because it wasn't designed on that kind of basis from day one.
Where did you download those standards from to load
When you download the IFC exporter that
Yeah.
I showed you in the web link, it comes in there. It's in there. It actually puts it in for you, and it will be like I've just shown. It goes into that place where the IFC exporter is. So you just find where the IFC exporter went. It goes into Program Files 86, Revit 2016. You'll find it in there, by and large. So when you've got that, so I've now got a definition of my properties that I'm going to classify. I've got a mapping between my objects and IFC objects. I can just export it. Okay. So the problem is that those properties I said, Cobie facility dot category, are not in my model. Now, if you're an expert in Revit, you'll know that you can go into, under the Manage tab, I could go in here under Project Parameters and manually create them all myself. Okay? There's a much easier way because there's a Revit plugin for Cobie that if I download, even though it doesn't work properly, will in fact put all them properties in for me. So I'm going to show you what that does. So I've downloaded that plugin. It's the documents in there are show you where it is, and I get these three things now for doing Cobie. So I've been talking about IFC. This is now the native Revit way of doing Cobie, okay? Which looks great. So I go in here and set up my contacts, all my settings, and away I go. So if I go into my, what I'll do is I'm going to open one I've done earlier because I don't want to bore you by going through all of these things slowly, typing them in. So in here I've already gone through this process, but I'll quickly run you through some of it so that you can see what's involved. So if I go into Modify, into Setup. So again, here's my contacts. You can see I've filled in this contact page for me with the details I need for it. And then I can go into Settings, and this gives you some idea of the complexity of Cobie. So the first question it's asking me is, do I want American Cobie or UK Cobie? That's just going to get bigger all the time, because Singapore's doing it now. How do I want to identify my objects? Do I want to use the Revit ID or a global ID? What classification systems do I want to use? And of course these are all American, none of the British ones are in there, which is really a pain. And actually to get these to be the British ones is not straightforward, but for another lecture. Okay. And then it's saying what units, that's really important for Cobie. So it's setting up that I'm in millimetres, I want things in square metres, and I want things in cubic metres. And then here we start to see the stupidity. So, do I want my space in Cobie to be a Revit room or a Revit space? Revit has rooms and spaces. I have no idea why. Architects do rooms, mechanical engineers do spaces. There you go. Clients tend to do, well, clients do spaces. So what this is doing is it's merging them all together, which it will show you in a minute, I'm sure. And then what about Cobie systems? What do I want? What components do I want? How do I want to put them out? Zones and spaces, blah, blah, blah. So it's setting all this up for me. And then here's the rooms and spaces thing. So if I'm putting out a cable tray, that goes in the space. If I'm putting out a ceiling, that goes in a room. Conduits go in spaces. Curtain wall mullions go in rooms. You can see it's a mess. You know, I mean, this has just got to where it is because MEP and architecture and structure have all had their own life cycles. No one's actually thought of it as a single model, really. So we decide this is the default setting, so I'll leave them. By and large, it gets things right. And then you decide what things you want to put out in your Cobie file. Doors, columns, whatever. You can list all of them as I have here or none. How do you want to see them? Now Cobie can't handle geometry. Cobie only deals with bounding boxes because by and large it's just designed to let you know where things are, not what they are. So it gives you the location. And then finally it's saying what schedules do I want to create. So in my Cobie spreadsheet, what do I want? Floors, I want them all. Fine. And then it does it. Okay. So that's the process of setting up Cobie. That's now done. So once I've done that, I can either use Revit's way of doing it, or I can use the IFC way of doing it. So if I go to the IFC way of doing it first, so I'll go Export IFC, choose the FM handover view, all the settings are okay, and I export it, then what I will get is, I'll just overwrite this file. So this is creating an IFC view of the world now. Now once I've got that, I've opened up the number of tools I can work with this significantly. I can take it to another BIM tool if I want. I can take it to a whole pile of analysis tools and reporting tools. I'm just going to show you it in XBIM. So if I come here and just get the Windows UI for XBIM. So this is just a simple, it's actually a demo app for XBIM. XBIM is a toolkit, it's not an application. So it's to allow people to design their own software applications. So if you use 4 projects, XBIM is the engine behind that. It's the engine behind the project with WellPlan, which does asset management. There's about 4 or 5. So what we do is we write software that people who make BIM tools use to turn their tools into BIM tools, which is what XBIM is. This is just a sample app we wrote to show you how you could use it. So if I open that file, you can see that that's come through now. So I've lost very little information. In fact, I think it's easier to see than it is in Revit. You can wander around it and you can see what you've got in all of these things. From a client's perspective, they've got enough there, I think. Yeah, they've got more than enough, haven't they? So you can send them that IFC file, and there are any number of free viewers that will do exactly what I've just done there to varying degrees of quality. But somebody asked me what's the structure of BIM. So we configured this to show you the structure of an IFC model. So what you can see on the left-hand side is we have a project. Within the project there's a site. Within the site there's a building. The building has a ground floor and a roof. And within the ground floor there's a living room, a bedroom, and an entrance hall. So you've got a number of consistent ways of viewing. So this is called the spatial hierarchy view, and it lets you see it by spaces. But it means that if I'm a client with 1,000 buildings in my portfolio, I can see them all the same way. I can make comparisons between them. I know how to navigate. So if I select the living room here, you can see it's gone dark in blue. That is the living room area on this side here. And on the bottom here, you can see all the properties of the living room. So if I just move that up a little bit and go to properties, now you start to see what's come out of Revit. So the property Cobie space, rooms, it hasn't got a category, and we're supposed to give it one. It's got a name, level ground floor, no description, it's got a height, gross area. So that's all. Revit has put all those things out as it's written the model out. And now I've got them in IFC, and if I want to put them into Cobie, all I need to do is come to here and export it as Cobie. I've got the wrong version running. Give me 2 secs. So put it out as Cobie. There are American and British templates for Cobie. So here, now I'm no longer having to worry about what I've got in the model. I can choose whether I want to send it to an American or a British person, because the IFC is the de facto standard. And if I want to open the spreadsheet when I do it, I'll just tick that. And hopefully, if I export that, it will create the spreadsheet on the fly. And now we have our Cobie output. So that's a complete workflow from a model to creating Cobie. And if you look here, you'll see that it's put out. Some of the details are correct, some of them aren't. Here's the 2 floors with all the data. For some of the data has not been put in, needs to be put in. Here are all the types of object in the building. There's a lot of furniture, different names that have been given in Cobie, in Revit. And then there's a whole bunch of components.
Did you just use did you drag and drop just basic items from Revit into it when you did it, and so it's just literally just taking that information that's already there?
They're just from the Revit standard library of furniture. Yeah. So what you now need to do is go back into Revit and start filling in the blanks so that the right information comes through. I will show you what I mean by that, and then I'll stop because I'm aware of time. So if I go to this bedroom here.
Do this for Barry's time.
Oh, please don't suggest that.
You can see that in the properties for this space, that Revit plugin that I downloaded has put these are the properties that we need to fill in. Okay, so I can say that this bedroom is sleeping area. And I can give it a room tag of 2 because that's what it says, it's room number 2. I can give it a name of bedroom. You wouldn't be wrong in thinking this is really stupid, I've already put all this in somewhere else. Hey, I didn't write it. Gross area, I don't know, 18 square metres. Net area, I don't know, 17. Usable height, 2400. Okay, so I've now updated that room, and I've given it a did I give it a category? Yep, sleeping area, which is the classification in Revit. Okay, and if I now export that using exactly the same process, and we look down here now at that bedroom, can see that they've all come through with the right data. So it's in a proper file. And if I go to here and I export Cobie, again, we'll get another Cobie version. And that space is now coming through with the category sleeping area. So it's putting everything into the right place. So although it's a little bit tedious, it's quite simple. You just got to fill stuff in, really.
So presumably you'd do that as part of your design process,
Yes.
and as you're going along, you input the data into the properties or the property
This
sheets.
is why I said sort the spaces out first, because
Yeah.
this is the key thing in Cobie, getting your
Yeah.
spaces there. Sorry, you didn't say so?
But this is not going to take a long time process of editing all this information inside the design stage phases. It's going to be longer.
It's going to be spread over a long period. It probably isn't in itself a lot of time, but it has to be done all the way through the process. And as I say, if you get the information into your libraries at the start, then you don't have to go through your project doing it, and they'll be in every library you put out, so you reuse it from job to job.
That was what I was just about to ask, whether it was transferable between projects.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get these properties into your families, in Revit particularly, or in ArchiCAD
Yeah.
or whatever, then it comes through, and that's why it's worth investing. The problem is, at the moment, not many people understand how to do this, so they go off and do everything afterwards. So what they commonly do is run the Revit Cobie exporter and send it, because all they've been asked to do is get Cobie, and I'll show you what happens when I do that. So here, if I now go to my add-ins and I export the same data that I've just done for you using this tool, it wants a file, so we'll put it in there. So same process, but doing it natively in the BIM tool. Slightly different looking spreadsheet, but essentially the same thing. I go and look at the spaces. Ah. It's got contacts. That's got that right. Better than the other tool, yeah? Because the other one didn't have my name right. The facility is not right, and the floors don't exist because Revit doesn't have floors. Okay. So what's happened? The reason this is like this is that Revit to IFC knows it's got to create floors and it's got to create spaces. Okay? Revit to Cobie doesn't go through that process, so it doesn't know. So you've now got to go in and you've got to glue. So what it's created for you inside Revit, so although initially it seems attractive, what it's created for you down here is a whole pile of spreadsheets inside Revit where you've got to go and fill them in order to get them out again. And clever people can write Revit scripts and programs to make that happen, but it's just a state of where we are at the moment. It'll get better, but you can, why do you want a spreadsheet inside your building model of the data that's in your building model? It doesn't make sense to me. So does that give you an end-to-end? So that's actually a real task that people are really wanting to do now, and really struggling to do, I think.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Steve.
Any questions? I'll turn this off.
Okay.